Question? Not today, no. So I'll check them later. Oh, well, you sent me an email a few days ago, right? Or a couple days ago? Yeah, no, I did. I responded to it. Okay, so yeah, check your email account and see if you got my email. Okay. Little music from the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Though a few years ago, actually, well, it's been many years ago, several years, maybe 5 years ago, they decided they didn't want to be called Mormons anymore. They want to be called Latter-day Saints. Or they want to be called the Latter-day Church of Jesus Christ, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's just kind of a mouthful. Not that Mormon is offensive, but they want to emphasize the fact that they're Christians, because I guess a lot of Christians don't think they're Christians, because they have some rather interesting views on God and other things. The Catholic Church does not consider them Christians. I know that. Their baptisms are not considered valid. But I guess I'll still call it the Book of Mormon, though. I don't think they're going to reprint the whole book, call it the Book of the Church of Jesus Christ. Because Mormon was the guy who wrote it, or compiled it, I should say. It's more of a compilation, an abbreviation of other records that this guy Mormon did. All righty. It's at the end of this PowerPoint on what is religion. So let me get there. Whoops. Went too far, Mr. Dunn. It's talking about the sacred, and then I want to give you this little quote from a book by Peter Metcalf, who wrote an entry on the sacred in the Dictionary of Anthropology. Who would like to read that for me? I'd like to read this little quote from the Dictionary of Anthropology. Mr. Belfield.
You weren't looking at me, you threw me off. The sacred denotes a class of objects, events, and beings that a culture defines as different from those of ordinary reality. As an adjective, it refers to a quality of difference, of being separate from, and more important than, the profane world. In many cases, it implies, wow.
Okay.
In many cases, it implies a link to an unseen or supernatural order of existence.
Excellent, sir. Good. Okay. So this is, an anthropological or an anthropologist's definition of what the sacred or the holy is. And these are things within a culture of human beings, things or things that happen to people or certain types of beings or persons that exist that this culture says are not ordinary. They're not the same as the rest of us. And so you have to interact with them differently than we do with the normal world. They are set apart. Remember the meaning of holy or sacred. It's set apart now from everyday ordinary use. Like I was talking about the chalice used in a Catholic Mass. It's basically a cup, but it's not a cup. Okay? So you have to treat it differently because it's been consecrated. I don't think they call it a consecration anymore. I think they just call it the blessing of a chalice, but whatever. But in the old days, they called it consecration. It's been made sacred and set apart. So you just don't keep it with the cups in the kitchen. The priest goes into the kitchen. Okay, where's my chalice? All right, there it is. No, it's kept in a sacristy. Oh, right. Even the name of the room where the priest gets dressed and has the chalice and the cups and the plates and all the other stuff. It's called a sacristy, sacer, the holy place. The holy things are kept. It's the same thing in other religions. Okay? So, all that's different. It's different. You treat it differently from ordinary things. And it's a quality of difference. It's difference of being separate from stuff. And more important than the profane world. Get to this word profane, excuse me. Do I get to this word profane? The study of religion. And maybe when I talk about the study of religion. I think so. When I get to, I think I mentioned somebody, Eliade, and he talks about the profane. All right. The profane world. Whoops. Uh-oh. This is new. That's weird. This is like brand new. I just bought them at Stop and Shop a few weeks ago. But be prepared, and it's not working on the board. I don't like that. For the monkey still grabbing for the banana in the bottle. It's like not working, so get rid of it, Right, let's see if this could get this one first. Yeah, that works fine. Same brand, brand new, from the same package as the other one. One works, one doesn't. Weird. Profane. The profane is another way of saying, in a religious studies kind of way, the normal or the everyday world, the profane world, as opposed to the sacred. Sacred is abnormal, not everyday. Profane is the everyday, the normal. Yes. Right. Okay, so in a lot of cases, as Metcalfe says, we're talking about things that are supernatural. Again, nature would be another way of talking about the profane. You could say super profane or supra profane. If I remember. Oh, yes, Ms. Uttenreither. Yes. Keep getting there, Ms. Uttenreither. So profane is the super profane, or unseen is another way, or another characteristic of the, I guess you could say, the sacred, that you don't see it directly. You have to have an experience of it, like a vision or something like that. This is another little quote from, I'll read this, from a textbook, I think I once used, Approaches to the Study of Religion, by Peter Connolly. And he says, the sacred is the only really crucial element for religion. When belief in the sacred is present, then we have religion, and when it's absent, we don't. So that would be his essential, or at least Connolly's view of what religion is. If you want a short encapsulation, it's the presence of the sacred, of this non-normal reality. Then you have a religion. All right, that's essential for him. Now, my definition of religion, and I've had several over the years, some short, some long. If this is my current definition, then I'm going to stick with, at least what I'm going to test you on, so please go with this one. It's a name, it's a word that is used to describe the way human beings, it is an anthropological reality. Humans have religion. All right, we have a religion. Sometimes in some religions, even the gods have religion. But it's basically a human artifact. It's a human thing. Okay, and it's plural because there really is no religion of one. Maybe somewhere there's some person on the planet that's like, no, I have my own religion, and no one can join it. It's only me. But typically that's an outlier. Typically, religions are also sociological realities. They're societies. They're groups of human beings who group together around these various beliefs and practices. So religion is a word for the ways in which human beings recognize the existence of ultimate reality, this final way that the universe is and how it works, which may include gods and goddesses, may not. Okay, but the ultimate reality could be different, but it is ultimate, it's transcendent, it transcends the cosmos and the universe, gives meaning to everything, every aspect of existence and life, even the afterlife. So how to recognize that ultimate reality, but also to interact with it, play around with it, okay? Get into it, enter into it in some way, not just leave it there, right? So that's what I would say religion is. So take a look, it'll show up on the quiz. That's my definition. Connolly's definition is the presence of the sacred. Okay, fine. The sacred can be another term for ultimate reality, non-normal reality. Okay, fine. But this is my definition. Now, how is religion studied? Now we're going to go into the next part, or next section of the course, where I'm going to talk about how, just give a very brief introduction to religious studies. Okay. What is religious studies? Well, religious studies is an academic field, okay, by which religion, which I just defined for you, is formally studied. It's the subject matter of this study, okay? If there is such a thing as religion, which I think there is, then the question is, can it not, just like any other field of human endeavor or human experience, be evaluated and studied, just like, as I said, any other human phenomenon? And the answer seems to be yes, because we have the whole academic field of religious studies, which studies in a descriptive, non-judgmental way how people experience and interact with ultimate reality, the religious beliefs and practices of human beings. So if you can study it, then something must be there to study, I would say. Okay? And so the study of religion is a unique field of study. It arose, actually, I do give you definitions. Forget. From Latin study, what does the word study mean? Studeo, studere. To apply oneself to pursue, to be eager, diligent about, in case you were wondering. I like etymologies, as you'll find out if you don't know already. But to be eager, diligent about something, you study it, just different from just reading about something. If you're really interested, then you would say, I'm studying it. Okay. Or even if you're not that really interested, like you have to study for this class. maybe the interest level is not so high as, I don't know, if you're studying about some influencer on TikTok or singer or somebody that you're really interested in, some actor or actress, maybe then you really study. It is study. You're diligent about it. You want to know everything about the person, what they're wearing, what movies they're going to be in, when their new CD or their album's going to drop, So you apply yourself. You pursue them. Yeah. So the pursuit of religious studies is the academic study of the religious beliefs and practices of humans. Religious studies arose as a unique field, at least the academic study, I should say, in the 1800s in Europe and America, so in the West. I guess I would say mainly in Europe, but also America. And the father, as they say, of religious studies was a man named Friedrich Max Müller, or sometimes just called Max Müller for short. And you can see a picture of him later on in life. We should make that picture bigger. It's so small. One second. There you go. There we go. Yeah, okay, so Friedrich Max Müller, you can see his dates 1823 to 1900 AD. And maybe this is the time that I should. Right? Maybe this is the appropriate time. I'm not going to, the dates AD and BC, which I'll use in this course because I am a Christian, but not everyone likes to use those dates. Okay, so this is 1823 to 1900 AD, which means what? If anyone has read the first chapter, yes. After death? Is that what it says in the textbook? Well, you just got the textbook, so you won't necessarily know. After death. After whose death? The death of whom? Jesus of Nazareth. Okay. Who is a religious figure? Yes. A holy man. A teacher about God. Okay. A supernatural reality. So I would say he's a religious figure. However, Jesus died in 33 AD. So how did he die before he died?
Is that what he
Well, it would seem weird to say that Jesus Christ or Jesus of Nazareth, when his life in 32 AD, 33 after death, then he was dead for the first 33 years already, you know, what's that? He had already died. How could we? What's BC mean? Let's try BC. Where do you think BC? It's an abbreviation for one. Hour. Okay, let's repeat it. BC. BC. What does BC mean? Huh? Oh, okay, sorry. She's the first person I saw.
before Christ?
Before Christ. Okay, yes, that's correct. It's an English abbreviation for Christ. Okay, that makes sense. So, yeah, the time before Christ. So 500 BC means 500 years before Jesus of Nazareth, or Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, as we'll talk about later, in Christianity. And you count down, so 500, 400, 300, you're counting down to his birth. All right, so fine. BC, yes, I'll tell you that's accurate. But what about AD? AD, whoops, sorry. Just trying to figure out, what's the first letter of your last name? What's the first letter of your last name? B? Ms. Boris? Okay. Well, oh, sorry. What was born?
John. I was like thinking of like, oh yeah, it's a year long. Oh, Jesus.
So you looked in the textbook.
Just, yes.
What are you doing looking in the textbook? Why are you even reading that? You're making me look bad. Okay, good. So she did the right thing. Look in your textbook. 'Cause I'm not going to tell you. It's discussed in the textbook. I gave you BC. I'm not going to tell you what AD is, but we are in the AD period. And I'm going to leave that for you to find in chapter 1 in your reading. It is in your reading, specifically dealt with. So 1900 AD is when he died. He's considered the father of religious studies. Why? Basically because he's the first person to really systematically, and you might even say, it's kind of an inappropriate use of the word, but scientifically study the field or study this experience, human experience of religion. Okay? His training was as a linguist. He was an expert in various languages, especially Eastern languages like Sanskrit, which I mentioned before. We've encountered Sanskrit from India. He was a German scholar, but eventually he emigrated to Great Britain and taught at Oxford University. Okay? Thank God, which we'll find out later why I say thank God he did. For us English speakers. And he was a pioneer in the comparative study of religion. As you might imagine, if he's studying Sanskrit, you know, a lot of the texts he's going to be dealing with were going to be religious texts, so that's naturally his study of the language naturally led to his study of the religious beliefs. So he compared religions, especially through language study. He also did a lot of translations, and that's why I say thank God he made his way to England, or we wouldn't have these translations. They have them in German, so Germans could read them, God bless them, but not English-speaking people. But because he went to England, he spoke English, so he created all these English language translations of sacred texts, sacred writings of Eastern religions, multi-volume work called the Sacred Books of the East series, which is online. It's in the public domain. Here's a website if you ever want to go check it out. It's a really excellent resource even today. I mean, the English translation is old. You know, it's late 1800s. So, and then the language has changed. But it's still readable. But it's still an excellent resource. You can still understand it. It's our source sometimes our only English language source for some of these religious texts. They just haven't been translated by people yet. So in some cases, you still have to go back to the SBE, the Sacred Books of the East, for English translations of some religious texts in some of these Eastern religions, because people haven't done them yet. They don't have a critical edition out yet. Okay, so it's still a crucial source for the English language translation of certain religious writings. And he laid the foundation through his various lectures and writings for examining religion in a rational, systematic way, not from a faith perspective, but from the perspective of reason and stuff like that. You can see some of his major works listed here: an essay on comparative mythology, mythology, which is not necessarily religious, but stories about the gods a lot of times, so it overlaps. His book, Introduction to the Science of Religion, in 1873, where he outlines how religion can be studied in a scientific way, rational way. Natural Religion were a series of Gifford lectures. The Gifford lectures are given up in Scotland. Forget which university. I want to say the University of Edinburgh, but I could be wrong. But anyways, they're given up at a university in Scotland, and then the lectures are all collected usually into a book, whoever gives them, so you have different Gifford lectures over the years. His Gifford lectures dealt with natural religion, so his ideas of what religion was and where it came from. His views are largely forgotten. I mean, he's an early theorist. He's the father of religious studies. His views are pretty much largely forgotten because, they were theories. I mean, he's starting out on something, but he wasn't an anthropologist or a sociologist or even a scientist, really. And he read, so his encounter was made, I guess, mainly through texts and writings, not through actually maybe experiencing the religions himself and talking to people who followed them. So he's thinking about, but he's thinking. So that's a novel thing. He was the first one to really start thinking, as I said, systematically. What is religion? Why is there religion? Okay, what's its purpose for human beings? Even if as I said, his ideas are largely, which were basically where a lot of it was based on his language study, have been forgotten and are not really influential today. But that happens in a lot of fields where you have the father of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt, or the father of sociology and stuff all in like the 1800s. And, their ideas, they don't mention them in your psychology textbook or your sociology textbook. Maybe they'll say some of the things they believed, but usually they're, especially with the early days, their beliefs are not really followed anymore. Okay, so even though he describes it as a science, and everything, you have to remember in the 1800s, especially with the dawn of modern science in like the 1600s, and all the great discoveries that people saw coming from modern scientific method, in the fields of biology and geology and astronomy and stuff like that, everyone wanted to be like the hard sciences, even kind of soft sciences like psychology and sociology, and in this case, religious studies. He even describes it as the science of religion, all right? And religious studies kind of is a science. It is scientific in the sense that it is a form of knowledge. It's not really a science as we would commonly understand it today. It's scientific, as I said. Scientia in Latin, scio means to know. So the word scientia, scio, to know, okay, and scientia is simply knowledge. That's all it means. So you have the College of Arts and Sciences, which includes classes like this. It would be a science. And then you have arts, artistic elements, drawing or music and stuff like that, things that techniques, in a way, you might call them technologies. But then you have things that are sciences, not forms of knowledge. Not just the hard ones, like I mentioned, biology or chemistry, but also soft sciences, computer technology, learning how to code, or learning psychology or something like that, criminal justice, which are forms of knowledge, scientia. So they're scientific, but they're not sciences per se, as we would call them.
Okay, what makes okay, let me just read my notes here, see if I want to skip over this or do I want to say it. Yeah, okay, I guess I'll say that or summarize it. What makes, things that I mentioned, like, say, computer technology or psychology or criminal justice that I just mentioned, what makes them, when I say they're scientific, they're more like arts in a way. You could define them as science-like fields, and that's what religious studies kind of is. It's a science-like field of study. Okay, it's more of an art than a science. If you take a history course, it's scientific in the way that it has standards for determining events and what happened. Okay, there are the canons of history that you learn, but there's a lot of interpretation involved. And the same thing with other things. Like, again, I go back to psychology. Psychology, you'll learn theories about, or you'll learn biology and how the brain works and stuff like that, and how drugs interact with the brain. But you're also, and you'll learn, experiments. You might do experimental psychology and run experiments on people and to see how people perceive things, and you look at the data, so stuff like that. But you have to do a lot of interpretation. That's where talk therapy comes in, and counseling. It's not just learning how the brain works, but how and experiments and stuff like that. But also you need to talk to people to see how they're perceiving the world and what their problems might be. And that's where a lot of interpretation comes in, because it's not always obvious. It's not always obvious. If you take a scan of a person's brain and you see there's damage to the brain, that's obvious. Okay? But if a person's brain is not damaged and they feel depressed or something, that's not so obvious. You have to get to the roots and find out why the foundation of their depression, why they might feel that way, which might be an experience. It might not be organic at all. It might be functional. It might be the way they're living their life, or they think about themselves, or been told to think about themselves. So interpretation is involved. Whereas in a hard science, you have the data. Okay? If you're a geologist, you got the rock, you got the stone. Okay, you got the physical thing there. You can hold it, you can look at it, you can put it into what you would call a spectrometer or some kind of machine, break it down, look at it at its atomic level, okay, and date it and stuff like that. You've got the data. All right, and it doesn't matter how you want to interpret that rock. It doesn't matter what that rock is. All right, it could have been a rock that was used as a tool. It could have been rock that was used as a weapon. It could have been a rock that was a religious item. Context doesn't matter to you as a geologist. You want the data. You want to find out how old the rock is, what kind of rock it is, its constitution, something like that. Chemistry, you care about, if I put this chemical in here and you combine it with that chemical, what reaction am I going to get? Okay? You don't ask why you're doing it. Whereas like in psychology, you're always asking why. Why do you feel that way? Why do you do those things? Okay? The hard sciences are more concerned with the objective data, the object. The soft sciences that I've mentioned are more concerned with subjective data, the subject, which can have a lot of interpretations. And religious studies is like that. It's more of an art than a science. You can interpret things in many different ways. However, it is scientific also in the sense that, like religious studies, like, say, psychology or anthropology or sociology, uses the techniques of the hard sciences. So I mentioned experiments in the case of psychology. You might, I don't know if we have a psych lab here. No, I have one or two students who've taken psychology. Okay, you don't have to say. Or counseling, or something like that, or social work, where you do have to take some psychology classes. You might have to do a psychology project, a psych lab or something. You have to come up with a little experiment or something. Questionnaire you give out to a bunch of random people, about something, and you want to see how they perceive, whatever, various psychological experiments. And then you interpret them. Okay? So you're kind of imitating the other sciences, like, say, physics lab or biology lab or chemistry lab, where you're taking physical elements and you're really running experiments, and you're doing the same thing as they are in a way. But but that's probably as far as it goes. You get data from that, but then that data has to be interpreted. And that's where you start seeing a difference, I think, between the science is, we might say, and the more scientific or the scientific art-like studies. Okay? But there is overlap and there's crossover, and some of the methodologies and techniques that are used by both. Okay? Religious studies adheres to what's called the scholarly method. Whoops. Oh, this is, you gotta look at my PowerPoints more often. This is an anthropologist. We won't worry about him now. These are just various ways that religion is studied, or where there's crossover with different forms of human study. First guy I'm showing you is one of the leaders of modern anthropology, Bronislaw Malinowski. Okay? Sitting there with a bunch of islanders from modern-day Papua New Guinea. He went out to study them. The other guy who came up over there with the cigar is Sigmund Freud, who's who was a psychiatrist, a medical doctor who studied psychology, very famous. Who else do we got here? Oh, what's that? Astronomy, I think. Ancient astronomical text. It's an example of astronomy. Sociology, the study of human beings and how societies group together and work. Originally according to scientific principles, they thought they could apply the hard sciences to the way human communities work, and I think they pretty much figured out that that doesn't work. We're like herding cats. Human beings are like a herd of cats, We do society in a lot of different ways. Neurology, biology, studying the brain. Okay, so how does the brain, what part does the brain or neurology play in religious beliefs and stuff like that? So people can run experiments like, try to create out-of-body experiences or visions or hallucinations, and then see how the brain works with that. Okay, and compare it. Okay. The scholarly method. There are three basic principles or attitudes of the scholarly method, most of which I'm going to follow in this course, but I'm going to break some of these rules early on, but then but mostly I'll follow the scholarly method. The scholarly method, as I said I gave to you in the definition of religious studies as an academic field, it's descriptive and non-judgmental, okay? It's looking for data, okay? It's not trying, and there is interpretation. Interpretation is not the same thing as being judgmental. Okay? So you're not trying to say whether a religious practice or argue whether a religious practice is necessarily true or false or wrong or good. Okay, that's not what you're doing as a religious studies person. You're not supposed to have that kind of agenda. You're just describing the practice and maybe why people do it and what place it has in, say, a culture or something like that, or within their religious belief. You're not supposed to be advocating necessarily for or against something. But the first principle of the scholarly method is you should not appeal to a criterion that in principle is unavailable to others. So, for example, at the beginning of this course, I am going to talk for a couple of classes. I think it's just a couple. Maybe it's 3. But anyways, I'll talk a little bit about the Catholic Church's view of Christian religions, just from our context of being in a Catholic university. If this were at, like the University of Pennsylvania or Penn State, I wouldn't. It wouldn't be appropriate. Because, the University of Pennsylvania might have had religious origins. Is it Baptist or Presbyterian? I'd have to look it up. But, Penn State is a state university. It's a secular university. And it just wouldn't be appropriate in that context. Why? Because I'm using a criterion that's in principle unavailable to other people. I'm assuming there are very probably people who are not Christian in this classroom, not Catholic, not religious at all. Okay, so they don't use the Catholic Church or what its beliefs are as the standard for judging other world religions. Okay, there's something else, like probably human reason or just observation or something like that. So the scholarly method is applying to a criterion that or does not apply a criterion that in principle others can't use. The basic criterion would be observation and human reason. You know, we all have minds and brains, and we all see things and can touch things and stuff, and we can talk about them on the same level footing. Okay? Whereas if I'm standing up here with the Bible and saying, well, what does the book of Baruch say about idol worship or something like that? You know, well, a person who's a Hindu doesn't accept the Bible as a sacred writing, or an atheist certainly doesn't accept it as a sacred writing. So it means nothing to them. It's not in principle something they can use or would appeal to. So it's not kind of fair in a sense. You should engage in a thorough investigation of the topic. That kind of, I guess, seems obvious. You don't want to be sloppy or slapdash about it. But in the academic study, you're going to try to thoroughly investigate as much as you can possible. All right, I'm not a religious studies scholar by training, so I have to know my own limitations. But I certainly obviously take a course like this seriously, so I'm always on the lookout for information. Because I can't know all these religions inside and out. I don't even know my own religion, Christianity, inside and out. And I've been in it for over 50 years. But every time, trying to, on the internet, newspapers, talking to people when I can meet with people, you know, oh, you're a Jain? Ooh, yeah. Or, you know, someone like a Jehovah's Witnesses here. Come on in, baby. Sit down. Would you like a cup of tea or something? Yeah, let's talk. You know, I want to know. Although don't offer a cup of tea to the Mormons because they're not allowed to drink candy. But let them in. They're very nice people. You know, usually men. They do actually have sisters. They do have women who go out on mission, and they're usually very nice people. I've encountered very, very good people. They seem to me. And yeah, so I want to know. You don't want to caricature. You don't want to just have, as I said, a slapdash view. You want to, if you're going to theorize about a religion or truly study it, as the word studeo says, you're pursuing it. You're passionate about it. You want to get as much information. You're not just mindlessly writing down information or facts. You want to show that you've really and deeply thought about the data that you've been given from this religion. And you're also willing to have your own theories examined. Okay, it's not, you know, like just listen to me. You know, you publish and you write books, you have discussions in order for other people to maybe challenge your views and say, well, I don't see it that way. I don't think they do it for that reason. Or I'm not sure you're representing the beliefs properly. Okay, fine, let's discuss. Where might I be wrong or distorting or whatever? And you should be willing to apply to your own beliefs, and this is where real fairness comes in, or equity or fairness, but you apply the same tools and methods of analysis that you would use, or you would expect for someone to use in investigating your beliefs. Basically, you're playing fair. You're applying to your own beliefs what one would use for another's beliefs. So, as a Christian, you know, a person who's a Muslim would not expect me, or maybe would not think it's fair for me to quote from the Bible to analyze Islam and the beliefs of Islam and the practices of Islam. Say, well, the Bible says this, but Muslims think this or do this, and therefore my conclusion is it's this, that, or the other. You know, think about a Muslim or Muslima person. How would they feel about that? Are you playing fair with their religion? Does that make even sense? You know, would you, if you put yourself in their shoes, if a Muslim was quoting the Quran to you and saying, yes, but the Quran, the Word of God, says this and this, but you Christians believe this. And so, therefore, and they use that in your analysis or critique, say, of your religious beliefs. You'd be like, well, that's not fair. We don't even accept the Quran. Or we don't accept the beliefs of Islam or something like that. If you're going, or, if, for example, if, let's say, again, you're a Christian and you're analyzing another religion, let's say Hinduism, let's try Hinduism this time, and you use like historical studies, anthropology, psychology, and you study what Hindus believe about the world and the supernatural, the sacred, you shouldn't be surprised if that's done to your own religion, which would, in my case, would be Christianity. Okay? You should be prepared to accept the same kind of standards for studying Christianity, using history, anthropology, psychology to study Christian beliefs. It shouldn't shock you, you know? It shouldn't be, well, you can't do that with, you know, with my religion, but you can do it with others, you know? Just to give a quick example, like when biblical studies also really kind of got going in the 1800s. They were there before. People were studying the Bible for a long, long time. But in the modern sense of biblical studies, really probably, oh, maybe the 1700s, same thing when the Enlightenment started occurring. And it was okay for some people to study, say, you know, Muslim writings like the Quran, or Hindu writings like the Vedas, or other religious writings from the perspective of history and language and stuff like that, and break up the writings and try to find, you know, which was written first, you know, who wrote these writings, if anybody, can we identify them, what do the writings really mean, you know, stuff like that. That was okay when it was other religions, treating them just like any other literature, you know what I'm saying? But in the 1800s, especially the 1800s, I should say, when people started turning that towards the Bible, like the Old Testament, that shocked people. You know, people started asking, like, well, did Moses really write the first 5 books of the Bible? Who wrote the book of Isaiah? Is it really one unified book, or is it a composite of 3 different writers? It's not just one. And did the Exodus really happen? Did Noah's flood really happen? You know, looking at archaeology and, you know, did Moses even exist? We look at history, historical records and stuff like that. Ooh, that was okay when you're talking about the Quran. That wasn't okay when you were talking about my Bible. And that was just the Old Testament. It was okay for some people when it was the Old Testament. Moses, you know, the Jewish stuff. Moses, Isaiah, the prophet, the Old Testament, the Jewish things that were considered Jewish. The New Testament, as we'll learn, was also written by Jews. Jesus was Jewish. Okay, so it's not a non-Jewish work as well. But people perceived it that way. But then people started applying it to Jesus and the New Testament, comparing the stories of Jesus, how the stories may have been changed, may have developed. Which gospel, which story about Jesus came first, blah, 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 blah. Was this letter supposedly by a man named St. Paul, was it really by him or written by somebody else? Ooh, don't touch my Jesus. But that kind of violates this principle. If I'm willing to use these tools for others, I should be willing to accept them for myself. So to recap, to summarize, okay? You don't use a criterion that other people can't use. You thoroughly investigate what you're studying and allow your investigation to be challenged by others. And the tools that you would use, historical studies, archaeology, stuff like that, you accept that they can be applied to your views as well, whether they're religious or even not religious. You know, say I'm an atheist or something, and I'm, going out there writing books about, trying to show how archaeology disproves all these events in the Bible or history and stuff. Okay, fine. But then if someone responds to me with, questioning my interpretations of the archaeology or history, I can't say, oh, wait a second, you can't use that against me. Well, of course I can. That's playing, basically, the generalization here is play fair. Be fair. Be fair. I would also add to this, be sympathetic. Even if it's a religion that I completely disagree with, be sympathetic to the people who believe in it. Try to understand why they believe that. Okay? Because I mentioned the Mormons before, why they wanted to be called Latter-day Saints instead of Mormons. Because, I've read, when I was younger, I used to read books about different religions, and Mormons fascinated me because I encountered some at the grocery store one day. So I started looking at books and reading about them. And a lot of them were written by born-again evangelical Christians who were not really very fair about them because they disliked the religion so much. because it was so, in their view, wrong in a lot of things. Okay, fine. I didn't accept the teachings of Mormonism, but I think we should be sympathetic. They're human beings, okay, and treat them as human beings with dignity, and their religions with dignity, even if they might shock us, or I come away with saying I really disagree with this, which might be the case, and I think that's okay, at least for me, I don't agree with everything that I see, or hear, or am told from a religion, but I do try to have sympathy and understand why the person. And I will not misrepresent, I should not misrepresent what they believe. Okay? That's part of the scholarly method. So, yeah, I'll talk about the Catholic Church and how the Catholic Church views other religions. That's belief confessionally oriented. But for the rest of the course, when I talk about other religions, even Christianity, which I believe in, so I'm open about that, I'm not going to look at it, I'm not going to take out the Bible and say, okay, now let's open your Bibles and I'm going to, preach the faith at you. I'm going to look at it in the same way I would look at the other religions. I'm going to look at the history, the beliefs, why people believe things, how they developed, archaeological evidence, if any, and stuff like that. And for other religions I don't believe in, Hinduism or Islam, Buddhism, I try to be sympathetic. I try to present their views accurately and fairly. Anyways. Let's see here. What else do we got here? The assumptions of religious studies. Okay. Calgon, take me away. Materialism. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
That is in your position, but in a different religion.
Maybe, but debate about what? Like, is Jesus God?
Why? Have you ever had going back and forth with trying to convince someone that?
Oh, okay. Nothing formal, but yeah, privately. And like I said, I have more missionaries in my house, and we sat and discussed. They explained their beliefs to me, and I asked them questions. Told them what I believed or why I didn't think that I did. Same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses. As much as I could, I had one Bible study with them, so I don't have to take it. Because they didn't want questions. Their idea of a Bible study was they read the questions from their group, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, and then you just gave the answer that the Watchtower gave you. But I kept interrupting and said, well, I think this, or what about this? They didn't want to hear that. So we didn't last long. But yeah, no, I've done that. Yeah, I wanted to explain to them why I believe things. I wanted to know why they believe they believe.
Never exposed to changing.
No, not close. I've considered, I've thought about other religions. Some of them are quite beautiful. Islam is very nice. The Mormons are very nice. I love the Mormons. Very nice. Hinduism is a beautiful religion. Very pretty, very, very, very old. Beautiful religion. But it came down, what do I believe in? Do I believe in their worldview? Do I believe in how they view the world or their beliefs? And it came down to I didn't. Oh no, I didn't get hurt. I still got my Jesus. Just haven't found anything better than Jesus. Although, with Hinduism, the Indian food. Oh, yes, sir. I might convert because of the Indian food. That's a real temptation. Yes, the Indian food. But, I really like my gods to have long hair and a beard. And what Jesus had. The Indian gods are fine, but a lot of them just little mustaches. No long hair and beards. Well, some of them have long hair. They always put it up with their bun and stuff like that. And I'm not really a big fan of the man bun. Food, that's very tempting to see. Yes. All righty. Here, what are some assumptions of religious studies? A lot of these assumptions carry over into the natural sciences as well. Materialism, naturalism, empiricism,
agnosticism, and evolutionism. Let's talk briefly about what each of these is. First, materialism. Basically, the assumption that the whole universe, everything is broken down or composed of into physical matter. Physical matter. And the Latin word materia, from which we get our word matter, simply, means stuff. Simply stuff, as in food, basically. That's a basic meaning. Materia is food. And then it comes to be conceptualized as a cause or a source of something, related, interestingly enough, to the word mater, which means mother in Latin. Okay? So again, the source, like a mother is the source of the baby, the source of the life, the living creature. So matter is the source, physical matter. Although if you do study some physics, you learn that really matter is energy and energy is matter. They're two sides of the same coin. So everything that we think is hard and solid is really not. It's where matter is a component of, yes, physical matter, but also energy. And it's not necessarily solid. We're mostly, I don't want to say air. It's not air. This is the word I'm looking for. It's not a void. It's the word I'm looking for. Space. That's what. Don't worry. The little man runs around in my head. Eventually he gets to it. He finds what I'm looking for. Space. Most things are not in the world are not matter. They're space. We're mostly not solid. We feel solid, okay, because of electromagnetism. But most of if you study physics, the area in an atom is mostly space. But materialism. The assumption is that everything's made up of matter. So from that assumption, it follows that there is no non-material or invisible realm of existence. There's no non-material, or everything is, if everything's matter and we can see matter, even if we need an electron microscope, then it's all visible to us in some way or another. There's no non-material, non-visible or invisible realm like a heaven or someplace, or God, that's spirit. It's not material in some way. However, that was before we discovered things like dark matter and dark energy, which are not visible at all. We can't see them at all. We can't measure them. Not even still sure they're there, but it's a theory. So, who knows? The universe might be a little bit odder than we think it, or not as clear-cut as we think it is, okay? Nevertheless, materialism is an assumption that there really is no supernatural world. So when you study a religion as a religious studies scholar, there are really no such things as miracles or gods and goddesses. These are just ways that human beings, talk about their experiences in the world. They experience something unusual happen, A person suddenly, gets healthy when they're sick. Miracle! And they can't explain it. Miracle! Or, they see, a bush move or a tree move, and it looks like it's moving on its own. It must be a spirit in there, They don't think the wind, or they think the wind is the spirit, It's actually what spirit means. It means a movement of air, wind. But it's all materially explained. It's all materialistic. But then again, as I said, you throw some of the monkeys into the wrench, like dark matter and dark energy. And as I said, the world becomes a little more complicated than materialists think it is. But naturalism is our next friend. Naturalism, from nascere in Latin, to be born, to arise or to begin, nascere, nature, natura. The view that the natural material world is material, is the only adequate source for explaining all phenomena. So we don't look for the action of a god or a spirit when something unusual happens. We have to look for physical, material explanations, natural explanations, which I think is natural. I do that as well, If I see a person, and, when they're walking around going, I don't think they're demon-possessed, Ms. Ramnath. That's not my natural assumption, I don't say, I cast you out, Beelzebub.
I think maybe the person has a mental illness. Yeah, yeah. Maybe they're schizophrenic or something. Or maybe they're just, being nutty or silly, something like that. Who knows? But that's natural, yes? Because I'm not immediately assuming it's some supernatural explanation. Okay, is the adequate sort. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. I might say this again, but I'll say it now. Personally, I don't think religion or religions are the best, very good at explaining how the world works. I think they're very good at explaining why the world is, purpose and meaning. I think that's where their strengths are. Okay? I don't think they're very good at actually explaining out there or here and I just don't think that's what their purpose is. People use them for that purpose. People will look in the Bible, for example, to find out how the world was created or where the universe came from, or in the Vedas of Hinduism to find out, how the universe works and stuff like that. Okay, fine. And sometimes religious texts do talk about how the world works, and they talk about the planets and the moon and the stars and realms of existence. Health, why people get sick, or mentally ill. They talk about mental illness and try to give explanations. Okay, sometimes those explanations might be correct, but more often than not, people are, it's just they're trying to explain things that they couldn't at that time scientifically understand. And the best thing they had was religion. They didn't have modern science yet, or the science they had was very limited, very limited. So where do you go if your regular sciences, don't explain what's going on? Okay, like people getting sick, like a plague or something in the community, and everyone's getting sick and dying, and the way your medical knowledge is 2,000 years ago is like nil, basically. I mean, they had medical treatments, but nothing that was really very helpful by our standards today. Where do you go from that? Well, the gods know more than you, so you assume that the gods will know where this plague has come from or why it's killing people and how to cure it, So you go to the local shaman, the local holy woman or something like that in the community, or you go to the temple and consult the oracle, some woman, usually a woman who, would go into a trance and consult the gods, why is this plague happening? And then tell you what to do about it, Okay, I understand it, but probably not the best way to go about it, all right? So I don't have a problem necessarily with naturalism per se, but, for naturalists, there's really no non-normal experiences. Everything can be reduced to a normal experience. It can be explained by a natural cause, for the most part. They think. Every now and then the natural world throws us, some curveballs that, or whatever, that they need to explain. Things that are really weird, like, for example, on, the planet Saturn, there's a big hexagon on the top of Saturn, this polygonal shape from geometry, six-sided figure. No one can figure it, but the thing is that the atmosphere of Saturn is not is gas. It's one of the gas giants. So how are gases forming into this perfect? It's perfect. You can see it. Go on the internet and see pictures of it. This perfect hexagon which rotates around. Don't know why. Maybe it's just a natural phenomenon. If you stir a gas long enough, it goes into various geometric shapes, but who knows? Doesn't seem to be that's the way physics works, so it's weird. Places like Vietnam, I have a video of this. What are the Naga fireballs? Is it Vietnam? The Naga fireballs. People go out to see them every year. Every year, for some reason, on this lake, little bits of fire appear and they float up into the sky. No one knows why. Maybe there's a naturalistic explanation for it. And, there's always that person who says, well, we don't know why it happens.
yet. But that's, to me, that's like any religious person saying, if they can't answer the question, well, God knows. The whole God of the gaps argument. Whenever you have a gap in human knowledge, well, God knows how it works. God knows how black holes work. All right. Well, how do Naga fireballs work? Well, we don't know yet. But science will figure it out eventually. All right, fine. Well, kind of like a science of the gaps argument. Anyways, naturalism, empiricism, human experience. Human experience, empiria in Greek means experience. So the practice of relying on personal observation and experiment for human knowledge. So it's not theoretical. Okay, you want to experience it yourself. Observe it. So religion, in the case of religions, religious beliefs and practices have to be tested in a way. If you can't observe it, then you can't assume that it's real or that it's true. So if you say, well, there's, the presence of God here in this room, well, can I see God? No, you can't see him or her or it. Well, then I can't assume that it's true. Or it's real, and I have no empirical knowledge. I can't generate any empirical knowledge of the presence of something I can't see. It's like you go on the internet. I like ASMR videos, ASMR. I forget what it means, but those little videos where people they talk really. They click and do, I hate it when they do the clicking and clucking, but I do like the little, when they talk. It's usually women who do this. Women have a great voice for this. Sorry to be chauvinist about this, but it's usually, and it's, soothing for some reason, Asthma. And, I got what was it? A lot of asthma videos have to do with, some of these people who are doing non-traditional medicine, helping people with their energy fields and doing nutritional, what do they call it? Nutritional something, feedback testing or something. They place pills on the person's body and then they move their arm, and if the arm, resists, then the body, I guess, likes the pills, but doesn't like the vitamins or whatever, and then, they figure out, okay, the body's telling me what it wants, okay? The body's telling you what it wants, not the person's brain, but our stomach knows better than my brain that I need more bananas in my diet than to see my doctor, my medical professional. Anyways. Okay, that's fine. And, but it has, some of these people speak with, very nice tones, soothing tones, which people are lying down, it's quiet. And so, yeah, I listen to them and because it's very soothing to listen to. I don't agree with what they're doing. I think it's, quackery themselves, person. That they're realigning the person's energy field or something. But, then again, I'm acting kind of like an empiricist because I can't see the energy field or see what their hands are doing. I just assume nothing's going on. Okay? But maybe there is. Ooh, well, that's where testing can come in. You can bring in equipment and see, can we, to look at, different spectrums of the light spectrum to see from what we can just see with our eyes, but there are other spectra. Is the body radiating something? And by this person placing hands or above or on the person, it's manipulating whatever. Can we see that? Okay, now that's an empirical test. Again, we're still assuming empiricism. We want to still see it. If we can't see it, we don't believe in it, or we question it. But that's at least the assumption. There is no God because you can't, or the gods because you can't see them. Which is actually really a bad argument, but because, consider our eyes. We don't really see anything, actually. What you're seeing is light reflected. You're seeing me, you're seeing the light in this room that's being reflected off into your eyeball, which is then traveling across a nerve. So now we have a second thing you have to deal with, the nerve, into the brain, and the brain then has to interpret that light energy. Again, it's energy. Light is a form of energy. So it's nothing physical, really. It's not material. It's energy. Then it has to convert that energy into an image. Okay? Even the colors. I mean, the colors have to be interpreted. Part of the light spectrum, it's the colors that are being absorbed by your body that I'm seeing, and the colors that are being reflected back off of you into my eye. My brain has to then give depth perception to what I'm seeing. So it's not just one-dimensional, you know. It gives depth perception. Yeah, so I mean, technically, you don't really see a lot. We don't see a lot. If you mean see directly, we see indirectly a lot of things. But I still believe you're here. I still believe you're here. I can hear you. I can see the light that's being reflected off of you. So I'm assuming you're here. So, I mean, it's not like this is, you know, there aren't any flaws or gaps even in these assumptions. But these are just assumptions that we make in religious studies. Okay, that if you can't experience it, then it probably isn't real or true. You need more information. And agnosticism. Okay, you're not making a judgment. So agnosticism means literally no knowledge. Okay, not, gnosis, knowledge, gnosis. Notice its connection with our word kno. We don't pronounce the K anymore, but we used to. 1,000 years ago, we would have said knowledge, but we don't anymore. But gnosis, okay, knowledge. So that the existence or nature of any ultimate being or reality is unknown or unknowable. That's the assumption, that we really can't know the existence of any, say, presence of a god or something like that. The supernatural realm may exist or it may not exist. Ultimately, that's unprovable. And I guess that's kind of true. I mean, how do you prove the existence of a god? What would be the standard you would need if you thought, you know, if you're going to run an experiment to prove the existence of a god or a spirit? Okay? Some people have run experiments on prayer. They've done prayer experiments, which are not very well controlled, in my opinion. To see, like, if you have people with illnesses and then you have certain people pray for them, what are the outcomes of the people's illnesses? Do they get worse? Do they go away? Do people die or whatever, die or get healthy, stuff like that. So people have tried to prove certain supernatural things. But again, you have to think, how do you experiment on these things? It's difficult. It's hard. So your methodology assumes that these things are unprovable, okay? And maybe that's not a good assumption to start out with, all right? But it's still an attitude that when you study something, you're not questioning its truth or falsity. You're avoiding it, okay? So it doesn't, a person may be studying a religion and actually believe in that religion, but in the process of doing it as a religious studies scholar, you're kind of bracketing out the question of truth or falseness for the sake of your study. You're just avoiding it. Doesn't necessarily mean you're denying it. Okay, so you can be a Christian and still, study the question like, I don't know, I might want to take one of the hosts from a Catholic Mass and put it under a microscope and see if it's turned into human flesh, And if it hasn't, I might maybe go into the subatomic level, see if maybe it's at the level of the atoms. Okay, I might do that. Or the wine from a Catholic Mass or something like that. I might be curious to do that. I might be even a Catholic who believes that, yes, the bread and wine do change into the body and blood of Christ. But I'm going to bracket out that belief for the sake of studying. In my methodology, I'm going to be agnostic. I'm going to avoid that question because maybe I want to test the belief, see if there's physical proof of it. Okay. I do that soon. And finally, evolutionism, that things develop. Just a fancy word for development, that all living things, or I should say maybe all things in a way, pass through stages of development from lower to higher forms. Lower to higher forms. This is taken from biology and in the 1800s, there was an evolution mania. Every evolution was applied to everything, okay? Every aspect of human life, because it seemed to work so well in biology, which seems to work. It seems to be a valid theory in biology. Not so sure it applies to absolutely everything, okay? Because again, as I said, with human beings, we're like herding cats. You know, people are people, and people do all sorts of different things for all sorts of different reasons. Some of them goofy. You got to account for the goofiness and irrationality, you know? People just do things because they want to do them. You know, bungee jumping. Does that make any sense? Skydiving. Does that make any sense? Well, at least you wear a parachute if you're skydiving. You don't want to hit the ground. Well, at least not at full force. If you're bungee jumping, okay, at least you're attached to something. All right? But then explain like mountain climbing. You know, hey, let's go and climb up the highest mountain on the planet where there's really not enough oxygen for us to breathe at the top, and there are dead bodies all along the way as we're going up. Maybe kind of omens telling us, don't do this. You know, it's like nature just telling you, this is stupid. That's okay. There won't be any avalanches or immediate blizzards. People do stuff. But evolutionism. So the assumption is just like in biology, where simple microorganisms come together and proteins all come together, and then you give them a shot of a lightning bolt and they start forming multicellular organisms and then backbones and all sorts of stuff. They come, you know, they go from lower to higher forms. There's assumption kind of with religion as well. I don't think that most religious studies scholars are as rigid on the evolutionism thing today as they were like back in the beginning of religious studies. But, you know, you saw these views, they appropriated the work of, you know, Charles Darwin. Before I go on to that, let me go my etymology. Ex volvo, to roll or turn out of something. Okay, so evolution, the lower form becomes the higher form. That lower form becomes an even higher form. Okay, so it's turning. Okay. Checked out on me, Ms. Uttenreither? Checked out on me? Oh, well. I'm right there with you. Charles Darwin, yes, his famous book on the origin of species by means of natural selection in 1859. Very influential, not just in biology, but in religious studies. And his evolutionary idea, for example, was applied by James G. Fraser in his famous book, The Golden Bough, okay, which was a collection of world mythologies, and he was looking for all sorts of connections between the world mythologies. So it was in 1890, but it went through a lot of editions. It was a very popular book. And his basic theory was taken from this evolutionary idea that you start out with the lowest form of religious life, which is magic. Okay, magic, just simple trying to control nature, make it rain when you need rain, stuff like that. Magic, trying to control the physical forces of the world. But then it becomes more sophisticated. You know, it becomes like a multicellular organism, not some protozoan. It becomes something else, you know, something more sophisticated, more evolved. And that's what he would call religion, human religions. And that's good for human beings. They can use that. But eventually, when we fully evolve, we will come to science. We come to modern science. So that's the evolutionary cycle for a man like Fraser. That religions first start out as magical, focused on magical ceremonies. Then they become more religious, as I said, more sophisticated, more complex. Okay? They still include magic within them. They add on other things, maybe ethical codes and all sorts of rituals. But then we get to science, where we're just relying now on pure reason. We don't need the supernatural anymore. We've evolved. Oh, excuse me. All right, so I'll stop with him and continue on next week. God bless you all. I hope I did 2 classes, and not just 1. Okay. But I got to look at my
It's looking pretty crazy.
Hi, thank you.
Have a good day, miss.
Heck, I'm going.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You will see. What?
Let's see, we got here Belfield. I ask her, I think so, but I'm not sure. He's gone.
You have a trainer on?
Crumpton, Prinzio, Fofana. Have a good day. Have a good day. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Hellier is gone. By Ms. Warren. And more. Oler, Poland, Rayner, Ramnath. Reither, Vesey, Vittel, Warren, Whitehall, Winko. Who else? Who did the reading? Mr. Belfield did the reading. Right. That's right. Shh.